Let's dive into DNA methylation because I think this feels very complicated for people to understand. So, can you explain what it is and why it has such a direct impact on how fast a woman is aging?
Genetic is the term for our genes, our DNA, and then above it, epigenetic, are the biochemical processes that regulate what genes are on and what genes are off. One of the key foundational ways that we regulate what genes are on and off is through this process called DNA methylation. And the clocks that we've developed to measure biological age are specifically looking at DNA methylation. The really cool thing about it is that the first randomized controlled diet and lifestyle intervention to look at DNA methylation patterns and biological age to demonstrate that, in fact, we could get in there and slow it down. The participants using our dietary pattern and our lifestyle recommendations slowed their biological age down by over 3 years as compared to the control group, and that was only in 8 weeks.
I've spent years helping women understand their hormones, and one of the most powerful shifts I've seen is what happens when you start working with your cycle instead of against it. It's not just about fewer symptoms, it's about feeling more like yourself again, more steady, more energized, more at home in your body. We studied cycle syncing, and 92% of women had less PMS in just 60 days. If you're curious, you can try it for free. Just download the MyFlow app on iTunes or Google Play and use the code FREEMONTH, which your cells, hormones, and your organs are actually aging, and that one can move in reverse. That's not a wellness claim, it's a finding from a peer-reviewed clinical research. And today's guest is the doctor behind it. Dr. Kara Fitzgerald is a naturopathic physician, functional medicine practitioner, and researcher whose groundbreaking clinical trials showed that an 8-week diet and lifestyle intervention reduced biological age by over 3 years on average. And she then replicated that work specifically in women. She's a faculty member at the Institute for Functional Medicine, host of the podcast New Frontiers in Functional Medicine, and the author of Younger You. In this episode, we are getting into what biological age actually means for your hormones, why your ovarian health and how fast you age are far more connected than most women realize, and the specific things you can start doing right now to change the direction your biology is heading. Welcome, Dr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm so happy to be chatting with you. Your book is so important, and also in a world where there's a lot of good ideas, but not a lot of research to, motivate us to take action. It's really an important finding that we can feel good about trying something like this. So let's start with this idea that we're all told, especially women, to eat well, to manage stress, to take supplements, and we still feel like something is accelerating in our bodies that no one can explain from an aging perspective. What's actually happening, and why is biological age the number we should all be paying attention to?
Well, I mean, that's a big kind of multifactorial question. I guess one of the things perhaps I would start since you're referencing women specifically, as our hormones change, as they start to decline and become a little bit erratic, that experience is profound, is pro-aging. I mean, that journey is pro-aging. So, you know, from our 30s, um, that phenomena is beginning to happen. And, we can see from the data that when we hit perimenopause and full menopause, basically the loss of those incredibly important hormones will kick up the aging rate. And so you mentioned chronological age and biological age, and of course we can't change chronological age. It's the number of trips around the sun we've taken, but biological ages, there's actually 2 biological ages. I mean, to be super simplistic, there's the aging that is prompted by environmental exposures. So going back to what you started with, speaking about, diet, lifestyle, sufficient rest, managing stress, exercise, etc. those kinds of, whether we're doing those in a way that's helpful for us or not, will definitely profoundly influence biological age. We call it exposomic biological age, the exposome being the sum collection of things you've been exposed to. And then there's another age phenomena, biological age phenomena, that is sometimes called programmed or programmatic, depending on the work you're reading. And that is something that's kind of like baked in. And menopause, if we look at all the menarche, like if you look just at the huge milestones from conception, because when aging begins, it's conception. Isn't that amazing to kind of
I
think
know,
about it that
to think
way?
about it that way,
Like,
but that's the
but
clock is
that's when
ticking.
aging begins. Yeah, so all the way up, there's these like really key milestones that are baked into our physiology, and we can actually see them across mammals. There's ways that you can measure, like we share some across mammals. We share some of these same phenomena. Um, so we have a lot to say around that exposomic aging phenomena. We really get to dictate how well we're doing it. And then we can get in there, and some of the so-called program stuff we can manipulate as well. I mean, we're using HRT now. There's a lot of really cool stuff that can help with, both types of biological aging. And so, the end result is we're in the driver's seat way more than we think we are.
And that's what I think is so important about your book. And it's just that concept, I think, is still relatively new for women, too, because I think so many of us as women think that menopause is actually, I mean, it's still treated as like this starting line for women's aging concerns. But really, this is beginning, as you were just talking about, much earlier. And there's so much that we need to do to take charge of that process to improve the experience. Um, and I love that you
Yeah.
talked a little about what the hormonal downregulation is doing to the rate of aging. Could you speak to that a little bit more, just so that women can
Sure.
appreciate that across the lifespan, how that might affect her rate of aging?
I mean, basically, our hormones, sex hormones, we think of them as reproductive hormones, the ingredients that allow us to conceive and carry and give birth to a child. But I mean, they do so much more, they really do. And they influence brain health and skin health and heart health and bone health, um,
Dr. Felice
liver,
Gersh
gut.
is famous for saying that these should be renamed from sex hormones to life hormones, which I think is
Yeah.
admirable.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
exactly right. And
yeah.
we develop, with the medical term hypogonadism, like they shut down. Like we don't have them anymore, after a time. And as a result, all of these um, physiological systems that they touch, i.e., everything, begins to deteriorate at an accelerated pace. And we start to experience that, relative early, definitely earlier than the whole definition of menopause and perimenopause, and those are really kind of those are arbitrary definitions.
Yeah, and I think understanding that, referencing this idea of biological aging in connection to your hormonal process, hopefully would, once you understand it, make you motivated to take some action on that exposomic aspect of what you can manage, right? Because if
Yes.
you're finding yourself at 35 with hot flashes, something's going on that's accelerating your process, while some things are programmed in, right? Some
Yes.
things
Yes.
are making that an accelerated journey, and I think that's
Yes.
what's really exciting,
Hmm.
that opportunity to come at that at a particular and slow that process down. Let's dive into DNA methylation, because I think this feels, very complicated for people to understand. So, can you explain what it is and why it has such a direct impact on how fast a woman is aging?
Yeah. So it's an epigenetic biochemical mark. So Genetic is, the term for our genes, our DNA. And then above it, epigenetic, are the biochemical processes that regulate what genes are on and what genes are off. And it's complicated. There's a lot going on, as you can imagine. There's a lot happening there.
Yes.
But one of the key foundational ways that we regulate what genes are on and off is through this process called DNA methylation. And the clocks that we've developed to measure biological age are specifically looking at DNA methylation. Predictably, across the lifespan, there are changes to DNA methylation patterns as we age. And so you can, you can predict chronological age with some clocks more reliably than other, and you can also predict time to death, time to morbidity, also, so time to ill health and all sorts of information. You can look at that at, on a systems level, like a whole person level. You can look at the organ specific rate of aging. You can look at the whole body rate of aging. So are you aging at a rate greater than your chronological age or less than your chronological? And you can also get a number. My bio age, the last time I measured it, was a good 10 years or so lower than my chronological age. And I don't know that means, as some people will say, does that mean that I've got 10 years, tacked on to the other side? I don't know. But, from that particular measurement at that point in time, I'm doing pretty good. Like, I'm pretty healthy. Um, so we get that information. We met with those tools come from us by looking at DNA methylation. So looking at patterns of gene expression. The really cool thing about it is that, and our study, is my book back there. Our study was the first randomized controlled diet and lifestyle intervention to look at DNA methylation patterns, and biological age to demonstrate that, in fact, we could get in there and slow it down. So the participants, using our dietary pattern and our lifestyle recommendations, slowed their rate of their biological age down by over 3 years as compared to the control group, and that was only in 8 weeks. And then we
It's incredible.
initially showed it in men, and then we did a follow-up case series in women. And we've since been researching it and hope to get back into the clinical research setting and look at a larger study with some tweaks that we can talk about. But yeah, I mean, what we eat, how we exercise, um, nutrients like vitamin D and omega-3s, can really, really profoundly affect the rate of biological aging. I mean, that's the take-home message.
And
Um,
we're going to dive into your approach in a minute, but I want to kind of go
mhm.
slow for people who have never heard this before. So, in this whole DNA methylation process, how can someone get tested? Is that an easy thing for them to do? How would they go about it so they could understand and determine where they are from a biological aging perspective?
That's a good question. There's so if you have a functional medicine provider, if you've got a provider who's a little bit outside of the box, they will be able to access these tests. These tests are available to clinicians. And they're also available to consumers, like regular people can get some of them as well. We do this testing on our patients routinely. Um, so yes, they certainly are more available than they once were.
So, this might be something that somebody really wants to figure out for themselves. Where could someone do some of this DNA methylation testing? How could a person go about this?
So clinicians who are practicing functional or integrative medicine are probably incorporating some of these labs into practice. So that's one option. And there are some, and I think the lab that we use, it's just highly respected in the clinical and research space. Their name is True Diagnostic. In fact, we're about to publish a study with them now. Um, they Many clinicians in our space use true diagnostic laboratories for biological age testing. I think they may have something direct to consumers as well. So if somebody wants to bypass working with a clinician and get the test themselves, they can look, they can go to True Diagnostic, TRU,
Hmm.
diagnosticlabs.com and root around. I'm just not certain about it. What else do I wanna say? The challenge with doing that, so the challenge with going and getting a test yourself is that it's nice to have the nuanced interpretation of somebody who's been using them and has an idea of how to interpret, how to, work with that individual clinically, whether they're wildly young at that measurement and they have a fabulous biological age, how do you maintain it, and does it corroborate with what's happening clinically as what like, what do we need to do? How do we treat this person as an individual, and how do we use that information? So, I think it's always nice to work with a provider who's versed on these tests. So that's
Oh, for
option
sure.
1. True
Data is
diagnostic.
good, but guidance is always better.
Yeah, yeah, the combination is the sweet spot. The other way is there's 2 other ways that I'm thinking about, and these are, you can access both of these through our website, drkarafitzgerald.com. In this book, we published a biological age quiz. The publisher asked us to design one, so they wanted something free in the book, and so we put our heads together, a bunch of us and, some biogerontologists and statistician and just, nutrition, just the best and brightest of us designed this. We say in the book, it's not validated, but this is based on the literature. We have since the book was published, we have a cohort who've done the quiz and one of the biological age measures, and we see now that they correlate. So that's fun. We have some preliminary evidence that we designed a pretty good quiz, and you can get that for free. So that's a fun, free window into whether, you might be doing important biological age interventions or not, and you can get that at the website. The other tool we have at the website, and this is for clinicians, is something called the Pheno Age Calculator. And it's a collection of biomarkers that any physician orders, looking at white blood cells, looking at, aspects of the red blood cell, looking at inflammation and some other chemistries. And there's 9 of these measures. And if you put that into this calculator, it can also give you a biological age. So for the and this to not get too complicated, this tool forms the basis of what one of the DNA methylation tests uses. So 3 ways: True Diagnostic, um, the quiz that we have, and then the calculator that's there as well. The quiz is probably the easiest entry for most people. It's very straightforward.
Yeah, and I think it's great because so many of us, find that we have all of these anecdotal experiences of what our body is doing, and it's nice when that really is supported also by the data. If you've ever wanted to ask me your own hormone questions, the Ovary Club Insiders is where you can do that. You'll get access to private podcast episodes where I answer real member questions with clear, science-backed guidance you can actually use. Join us at alisaviti.com/insiders. Mitochondrial health, it's this conversation keeps coming up in research on women's aging,
Yeah,
ovarian
yeah,
aging. I'd
yeah.
love to hear your thoughts on the connection and why you think it matters for women's health.
Well, there's something called the hallmarks of aging, which are key processes in the body that drive aging forward, when they're disordered or slow the aging phenomena down. And mitochondrial fitness is one of them. It's huge. And as you know, I'm sure you've probably talked about on your podcast, ovaries are wildly mitochondrial dense, the most mitochondrial dense tissue in the body. I mean, we're just and mitochondria make energy. It's about producing, using, managing energy, and so we know the ovaries are just wildly high energy. I mean, we're preparing the body for conception, monthly. I mean, it's just kind of crazy when you think about it. Like our bodies just put so much energy towards that event. And then, of course, the ovaries are at the epicenter there. So, um, yeah, mitochondrial wear and tear over time. I mean, it's a serious hallmark of aging. The, um, the intervention. So the intervention that we used, we didn't do mitochondrial measures on our original cohort, but the um, nutrients involved and the exercise prescription and the meditation practice, all of them have some favorable influence on mitochondrial fitness and mitochondrial health. As we get ready to submit a big grant, actually very, very soon, um, we will involve very specific investigations into the mitochondria. So yes, hugely important hallmark of aging. Maybe, I've had debates with colleagues that mitochondrial fitness is the most important hallmark. I think epigenetics is, but I mean, it's just what scientists do, debate these kinds of things.
I love
It's
it.
kind of
I love
funny. I
it.
don't know.
Sounds
Yeah.
sounds like my kind of conversation. Okay, what counts as stress most women wouldn't recognize, and what does that particular type of stress that you're about to sort of share, what is that doing at the cellular level?
That's a good question. God. You know, um, there's a lot of flavors to stress. There's publications looking at, well, we know lack of sleep, which can be stress induced, is a pro-aging phenomena. Insomnia is definitely pro-aging, and it absolutely compromises DNA methylation and epigenetics. Short-term intense activities, God, having a kid, having a baby is like not the baby, it's about the process of being pregnant. That's pro-aging, believe it or not, short term, and then you deliver and you bounce back. Generally speaking, there are some exceptions to that. Some scientists argue, well, if it's short term and you bounce back, then it's not really pro aging. But it's interesting because it tracks along the same sort of path as the aging um phenomena does. But you can bounce back from that experience. Surgery is a pro-aging, but again, as you recover, you bounce back. Experiencing abuse, childhood abuse, even, but just that and past that is a very profound pro-aging phenomena. Um, I think the relentless cortisol activation, and this is probably where a lot of listeners fall, um, sort of being in the stress response, being in fight or flight. Maybe you're anxious about wor- work motherhood
Yeah,
balance
that
or work.
always on kind
Mhm.
of.
Yes, yes. That grind, that sort of cortisol driven grind will have a pro-aging phenomena, over time for sure.
Yeah.
One of the really cool things though is that we can turn that around. Meditation, and the reason we include meditation in the intervention is that it's really anti-aging. And it doesn't take a lot. Yoga, tai chi, um, straight formal not formal, just meditation practice, exercise, all of these things are anti-aging. And what's cool is that they're anti-aging fast. You don't have to be an expert meditator to experience the fruits of that. They noticed favorable epigenetic changes after one meditation or even one exercise event. However, they build on each other, they compound. So really having that habit consistently over time, you get those benefits. But we can see just starting the journey, sticking our toe in the pond, we'll see some benefits. And if you think about it, like if you're a meditator, you're anybody who started a meditation practice knows that they're like crazy. As soon, when you start, it's like you notice you have what they call monkey mind, but even that is beneficial. It's kind of amazing.
And I love that about your work, your message, it's just that it's all impactful, anything that you're doing that sort of is supportive of this healthful aging, whether you're meditating or moving, any little
Mhm.
bit is
Mhm.
worth it. It's worth your effort and it makes that impact. So it's really, I find that very motivating.
Yes.
Um, okay, women are often told that their genes turn hormonal fit, like, oh, early menopause runs in my family, so that's just what I'm going to expect. What does
Mm.
the epigenetic research actually say about that?
That's a good question. I would say that, well, I think broadly speaking, with regard to aging, we have way more control over how well we age than we thought. With that, we don't need to be a victim of our genes or what our the prior generations have gone through. Um,
I don't think we can bookend that enough. Like, let's put a
yes,
big star, circle that
yes,
mentally as you're listening to this podcast.
yeah,
What your mom went through, your aunts, yes, there's inherited mitochondrial, maternal inheritance, but as Dr. Fitzgerald is saying, what you do with your
yes,
diet, with your lifestyle, with your self-care routine, it is really the determining factor more than those
yes,
inherited genes. Yes, very
yeah.
important.
Um, I was just talking to a friend of mine who's focused her energy on fertility work, and I asked her how, people working with her, so she's a 20-year functional medicine clinician. She's inherited many women who've been through IVF. Um, how many women failed her treatment and needed to then go to IVF? And she sat there and paused and thought for a while, and she was like, I haven't had any. She's like, "I haven't had any." We have somebody in our clinic who does a lot of fertility work as well, and, basically you go in be careful what you ask for because 'cause you're probably gonna get pregnant if you go see her. Um, it's just a real testament to the power of diet and lifestyle, like, it works, like, you can profoundly turn things around. And it does take some effort and some commitment, but it's so joyous and empowering, to be able to conceive and carry to term and deliver a healthy baby. So, um, yeah, we don't need to be victims of, what we think is our genetic inheritance. The other piece is, though, for those women who do hit an early menopause, and is that, there's really good hormone replacement therapy. We've got bioidentical estrogen now that's, pretty broadly available. It's not expensive, bioidentical progesterone. Um, more and more women are using testosterone, and hopefully it's going to now it's considered a scheduled substance. It's treated differently than the other hormones, and that should change soon. But we have these tools, and I think and of course, the Women's Health Initiative, as I'm sure you've talked about here, has really been broadly reanalyzed and criticized, and we now know that, using HRT is probably an incredibly important thing for many of us to do.
And I think it's just the beginning. There's some really exciting research that's coming out about looking at different pathways to energize ovarian function when it comes to sex hormone production past menopause. So I think that this is version 1.0 of
Yes.
menopause care. And I think that there are some pretty cool things that are being
Yes.
either drug development, vaccine
Yes.
therapies, I mean,
Right.
genetic
Right.
manipulation. There's all sorts of
Right.
interesting things coming down. There's even in the
Yes.
short range peptide therapy that's being looked at as far as ways
Yes.
to enhance ovarian function and therefore the aging process and hormonal output. So
Well,
there's so much happening. It's like the best time to be
it's
alive as a
exciting.
woman, because
Yeah.
this is unprecedented from a historical perspective. But I think your message of being proactive, of it's not overwhelming and complicated, is
Yes.
so important. And on the flip side of that, what mistake do you see women making kind of repeatedly when they're trying to support their health, their aging, their hormones long term? Something that they think is helping them, but that actually isn't. Any cautionary tales?
Okay, so something that they're doing that they think is helpful. Um, what would I say?
Hmm.
I mean, excessive manipulation of their dietary pattern, maybe,
Thank
curtailing.
thank you for saying that because
Yeah,
I think so many women are getting confused about the biohacking conversation and fasting and cutting
yes,
and, and any of that extreme diet
yes.
and even extreme exercise is really pro-aging from a woman's perspective.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it can be in men as well, but yeah,
Sure.
for sure. Yeah, it is true. You could turn the volume up on exercise and, yeah, there are some studies looking at it, I mean, I mean, it's obvious, right? We don't necessarily need the research paper in the end. You can see when someone's pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, that they end up, um, they end up actually looking like they're aging because they've been so intense around exercise. It's interesting, there is a study published on being able to identify accelerated aging. Like we can actually look at people, and if they look older, they're probably, older than their chronological age. That's probably true. And it kind of makes evolutionary sense, right? That we'd be able to sort of identify less healthy individuals, for our own survival and maybe, yeah, maybe be careful, with that. What was I gonna say? So, yes, exercise, pushing the exercise envelope. So, moving outside of what's appropriate for you, the individual.
I think
We ha
that's especially an important conversation for younger women with, body image issues and weight and societal pressures. And I mean, I've worked with women for 25 years, and I mean, just the sort of frustration, whether it's managing PCOS weight, which, I've lived through myself, or getting your body back after a baby, which is like, the very popular magazine article topics, or,
yeah,
you know, navigating your body changes through midlife, the pressure to look a certain way, has women flocking to fitness classes in droves and really doing that in a fasted state, doing that to an excess where it's just stressing out their adrenals, et cetera, et cetera. And
yeah,
all the details. Some we don't have to
yeah,
beleaguer the point, but I think that this is something from the context of aging that I don't think we're connecting the dots around enough. And I'm so appreciative that you're bringing that forward because I think women go to it
yeah.
thinking this is going to make me healthier, but it's not.
Well, and I mean, I just wanna say that we now, in my practice, 20 years in, we see more people these days coming to us with what we call orthorexia. And it's really like a new eating disorder, so they're trying to eat right with such, control that they end up being on a very limited, ultimately nutritionally inadequate dietary pattern.
Yep.
And that can be for a number of reasons, but, yeah, those 2 phenomena, or, 1 meal a day became popular. Some kinda influencer folks and, even some respected scientists, but they're not trained in nutritional science for humans. They work with mice and stuff like that, but do this 1 meal a day phenomena, and you're not gonna see a woman nutritionally replete following that, you know? You're just
No,
not
I
gonna
mean,
do
and
it.
in my second book, I mean, there was research that I was looking at around this sort of extreme calorie restriction and even ovarian size that, it has a major impact on our health. And if the ovaries are kind of the battery packs we have for our hormone creation, then we need to be doing things that are supporting them, not starving
Yeah,
them. So I think that's great.
yeah.
Let's get into your diet from the Younger You
Mhm.
protocol. How how exactly would you say is the Younger You protocol different from, let's say, I don't know, just eating a Mediterranean diet or
Good.
following
Yeah,
general healthy eating advice? I think
yeah.
it's very specific. So I'd love for you to speak to that.
Right. It is, so to compare it to a Mediterranean diet, it's like a Mediterranean diet on steroids. For perhaps not the most apt prescription, but it kinda makes the point. We totaled out the polyphenols, so we're very bullish on plant phytochemicals in our dietary pattern, extremely bullish. So we basically think almost more is better. We probably there's about somewhere between 7 and 11, cups of mostly veg and then some good fruits in there in the dietary pattern. Um, we totaled that out to be close to 3,000 milligrams a day of these plant phytochemicals. And if you look, it's maybe 3 times greater than or more actually than an average Mediterranean dietary pattern. So very, very high. And the science corroborates that. So when we went back and did a reanalysis of the dietary pattern to figure out the elements that were making the heavy lift, and we published this last year in 2025, indeed it was the most polyphenolic dense compounds in our dietary pattern. So oolong tea, green tea, turmeric, rosemary, blueberries, those players were the heavy lifters, the most polyphenol dense. So yeah, we have strong elements of a Mediterranean dietary pattern with the volume turned up a little bit. It's also anti-inflammatory. Um, it's low glycemic, there's not it's kind of keto leaning. So it's not frankly ketogenic, but the participants in the study did lower triglycerides, which is kind of a surrogate marker of being in some degree of ketosis. They were using fat as fuel. Um, so we think we were successful in that. The hydration is good fats and so forth. A decent amount of protein in the original dietary pattern, although um I recently blogged about that and I can give you a link to it. When we're lifting, so I cover this in the book. When you're lifting weights, you need more protein. When you're older, you need more protein. When you're pregnant, when you're going to conceive, when you're nursing, etc., you need a whole bunch more protein. So I wrote about that in the book. In fact, we have a whole preconception and pregnancy and postpartum dietary pattern in the book, but it's way in the back. So it's like missed. I think maybe 10 people actually found it and used it. Um, but I wrote recently how to toggle. So if you're really getting into resistance training and that's appropriate for you and you need protein to kind of build those muscles, how to toggle between our younger you dietary pattern with a higher protein intake, which I myself do. So I wrote about my thoughts and experience on that. But yeah, I think it's a good anti-inflammatory, healthful dietary pattern, just leaning heavily on those plant phytochemicals.
I mean, I'd love to hear like a quick take on, what's a day in the life of your meal plans.
Well, I have to keep it simple. I've got a busy existence, and I'm not super excited to spend a bunch of time in the kitchen. My
So you're just like everybody else,
yeah.
busy, not
Oh,
cooking, but it's like
right, right,
totally,
right.
it's normal.
My co-author in a lot of this work, Romilly Hodges, actually, who designed this pattern with me. Um, She is. I mean, she's just a rock star. We have great recipes in the book. Great, great, great. I would say for me, the easiest way for me to hit my targets by far is a salad. It's just a well-designed salad where I can dump in everything. Key players in the younger you dietary pattern are eggs, also, some beets. We consider those to be kind of a superfood with the betaine element. Um, and protein, fatty fish, etcetera. So if I can just design myself a good salad, lots of colors, lots of green, throw some protein on that, a nice dressing with some good fat, goods and spices. I mean, spices, herbs and spices are epinutrient wonderkins. They're
Yes.
dense in those polyphenol compounds
Yep.
and get that on there. I've hit a lot of the targets. Just by doing that, I've hit a lot of the targets. Um,
I'm so
it'll
curious just because, you mentioned this sort of 7 to 11 cups of plants, right, which can feel daunting to a lot of people. So when you're constructing a salad, just volumetrically speaking, are we talking
It's a
about
pretty good sized salad, it is. I don't have an example with me today,
yeah.
but, it's a pretty good sized salad,
Yeah.
and I'll nosh on it, like, I'll bring it to the office, and then I'll nosh on that throughout the day.
Hmm.
Um,
And breakfast?
if
What's a breakfast like for you typically?
I am not a huge breakfast eater,
Mm.
I like coffee. Coffee's legal on the younger you, as is chocolate. Um I have my coffee in the morning. I might do some nuts and seeds, that's
Hmm.
easy. I will do some nuts and you can do a little bit of protein, but I would say for me, by far, coffee and then maybe some nuts and seeds,
And
and
then you're
then I
doing your salads throughout the day.
yeah, and then I'll come home, and when I'm not always intentionally dialed into the exact, 8-week dietary pattern,
Sure.
but when I come home and I'll just sort of look at my targets and see what else I need to do, and that'll make kind of a easy sort of light dinner. So maybe I need another serving of protein and, some extra greens, and I can do a stir fry. You can take that same salad in, winter months and pop it into the stir fry, easy peasy. And it'll shrink way down for people who are intimidated by the amount of greens, like, I've just gotten used to it, but, smoothies too, smoothies for we prescribe elements of the Younger You dietary pattern to all of our patients, so they get if you think about food as being information, directing genetic expression, like you just really want to make sure your genetic apparatus, your cells, all, is bathed in this information because it's really directing your health. And again, your biological age and, your risk or protection from all of these chronic diseases of aging. So we want this information. We want our body to live with, the best information possible. So all of our patients get this, even kids, and I talk about that in the book. I mean, that's arguably we can bring this kind of food as information, thinking to children and help design epigenetics optimally for, the best life possible. They
I
don't
think
have to be caloric I mean, clearly, they don't have to be eating, keto leaning. They shouldn't be. They should be eating carbs, but just the information from plant phytochemicals and so forth, it's essential for all of us at all ages.
And I think so relevant as well because we have girls and boys who are, having precocious puberty is on the rise,
Yes.
which
Yes, yes,
is a
yes.
sign of, aging, right? In a way, advanced aging and
Yes, yes, yes.
stress,
Yes.
inflammaging, if you will.
Yes,
So I
yes,
love this idea
yes.
as food as information, cellular information, habit stacking that year over year. I mean, I have
Yes.
2 daughters, one who's 11, will be 12 in a couple of months, and the other one's 4, going to be 5, and, I've been with someone like myself who had such a very dysregulated pubescent journey. It's been sort of a target and a goal of mine to make sure that we reverse engineer her pubescent journey to have it be normal. And it
Yeah.
is because I've been sort of doing that pre-conception while she was in utero, all that food as
Yeah.
information. It really
Yeah.
has such a profound cumulative and positive impact. So I could not agree with that. The time to start is immediately.
Yeah.
whatever,
That's right.
whatever your
That's
age is.
right.
Okay, a
Yeah.
couple things on your study. So the 8-week intervention showed, as you mentioned, a biological age reversal on average of about 4 to 5 years in women using,
Yeah, right.
again, just diet and lifestyle alone.
Mhm.
Um, and, we've talked so much already about what was happening in the body, and what the intervention looked like. What was the most surprising finding for you that came out of this trial? Something that you might not have even expected to see?
Well, we didn't expect to see BioH reversal. I mean, we didn't at all. It was the first study of its kind. So w when we started our study and it seems like you're like, "What? You're what?" When we started our study, it was thought that biological age change in human beings was not possible. We were recruiting and running the protocol. We actually started our design in 2017, started recruiting for the study in 2018, and ran it through a good chunk of 2019. Yeah, because we got our data in about October of 2019. Um, Steve Horvath, who started the whole field of epigenetic clocks at UCLA, is on record saying many times that he didn't think we could change the clocks in humans. And it was during our study, so we were underway, and the very first study, which he was a author on, was the TRIM trial. Actually, there was a vitamin D study before that, just barely before that. So it was 2019, our study is underway. The TRIM study comes out showing clear biological age reversal in a very small cohort of middle-aged men using growth hormone, using aggressive interventions. Growth hormone, metformin, DHEA, zinc, those things aren't aggressive, but the growth hormone, the metformin,
Hmm.
and just showing very clear biological age reversal in the clocks. And Steve Horvath was their statistician. He ran all of the clocks. And time stood still. Like, for those of us thinking about this at all, it was a watershed, extraordinary moment. We knew when we ran our study, so the we designed the DNA diet. It was originally called the methylation diet and lifestyle. That's what it's called in the research setting. If anybody wants to look it up and find the papers, methylation diet and lifestyle, and then it was rebranded Younger You. But we designed it with our best read on the science, thinking that we could favorably change epigenetics. One area that I was very interested in was cancer, because the tumor microenvironment very reliably hijacks epigenetics and turns genes on and off to push the cancer, the process forward. Um, and so but you can see all of the chronic diseases of aging having these epigenetic manipulations, these unfavorable epigenetic manipulations, and indeed the aging phenomena looks like cancer. I mean, it's kinda crazy, like like the genes that cancer turns on and off, that same phenomena is happening as we age. And when you look and what is the biggest risk factor for cancer? It's aging. It's not smoking, it's not diet, it's not obesity. It's aging itself, and you can see it. You can see when you look at epigenetics, it's wild. And so for me and Romilly Hodges in my practice, we thought, our best read on the science was that a diet and lifestyle pattern could change these things. And yes, we'll look at biological age, but we're really going to be more broadly looking at what they called epigenome-wide associations. Um, so that's how we went into it, not holding our breath that we would change bio-age at all. Definitely, there was no diet and lifestyle there was no evidence. This field didn't exist in 2019, and it's not that long ago.
I know.
So, um, the TRIM study came out. We were very excited. We were excited to look at the clocks to see if we had made any movement. And I can't even tell you how crazy it was. I can still see myself in my living room in our house in Connecticut, talking to one of the guys in the study, and, sharing with him that we had changed the Horvath clock in our study participants as compared to controls, slowed it by over 3 years. I mean, it was just, it wa it was unbelievable. It was very, very exciting. I mean, it's changed my career. It changed it. It just changed the trajectory of what we're focusing on now, and it really it helped fuel. It didn't kind of, but it really helped fuel the field of, nutritional epigenetics to put science behind this idea that, we are what we eat, we can.
Oh, and now, I mean, you can just see in the biohacking, influencer space, people going like bonkers with this. And I mean, I would
Yeah.
love to,
Well,
I mean,
there's tons of science out. I mean, very, very validating for us was, after we published, just having all types of human data come out, kind of
yep,
validating this, looking at
yes,
different iterations of the Mediterranean dietary pattern and so
yeah.
on. It's just really satisfying.
I have so many questions, but I'm going to try, keep us on time a little bit. But I want to talk a little bit about foods because you mentioned earlier green tea, turmeric, garlic, berries, rosemary.
Hmm.
I want to understand for our listeners what makes these particular foods so powerful at the genetic level. And then I want to also just check in about obviously, you're very clear that it's a food first approach in your research, but I'd love to also ask about where you think supplements fit in once that food
Sure.
foundation is placed. So start with these like super polyphenol rich food sources. What are they doing to us? And then we'll switch into the supplements.
Yeah, they have a regulatory influence on DNA methylation, among other epigenetic biochemical marks. Yeah, absolutely. They're right in there, influencing what genes are on and what genes are off. So methylation is a nutrient dense process. Maybe you're listeners have heard of, we need B12, we need folate. Eggs are good for us. Well, it's because of the choline, which plays in here. I just mentioned beets were a food that we think is really important. Again, it influences methylation. Methylation is this biochemical process that's basically happening everywhere, all of the time in our body. And it happens in DNA. So DNA, they put a methyl group on different regions of genes to inhibit them. So a methyl group is a carbon with 3 hydrogens, and when a promoter region of the gene is dotted with these methyl groups, that gene can't be transcribed and turned on. So they're blockers. When there's an absence of them, that gene can be turned on, and we actively inhibit gene expression, and then we actively pop those methyl groups off. So there's different enzymes in the body that dictate this all the time. And as I said before, as we age, like again, or in cancer, those methyl groups can turn off genes that protect us, and turn on genes that push aging forward or push cancer forward, inflammation, et cetera, some of the things that you talked about. So the polyphenol dense foods, well, there's two categories that we use in the dietary pattern. There's the foods that help make those methyl groups because we need them. And actually, as we age, we make less of them. So we need those all the time. We need loads of them. So methylation needs to be humming. But we also need,
Especially if you have a known methylation problem, right? Like an
or you're going to
MTHFR.
conceive. I mean, we
Yeah.
always do. Like methylation is just used all over the place. Um, But you also need to dictate where those methyl groups are going on with specific with regard to our genome. You don't want to turn off genes that we need on because they protect us. You want to inhibit the genes that are going to be damaging. And it turns out that polyphenols, these plant phytochemicals, really seem to play a big role in doing that where methylation is happening. And so we saw in our study that we didn't increase net methylation of the epigenome when you looked at all of the marks as compared to controls, but we rearranged how methylation was happening to a more youthful pattern. And the paper that we're just about to submit, we can see that we turned on, so hypomethylated, plucked those methyl groups off, some tumor suppressor genes. So those genes that protect us from cancer, those all important genes, we favorably manipulated those, as we look at this next publication. And we also really cool influenced, going back to that whole hallmark of aging conversation earlier, we influenced some of the key processes in the hallmarks of aging, just kind of favorably moving things towards a more youthful pattern. So we're beyond looking just at the clocks to what happened overall with gene expression in our participants. And it's super cool to see it kind of corroborating what we saw with the clock. And just the other thing that's really cool about it more broadly is the power of nutrition. How profound it can affect physiology, at this most rudimentary level. And it's new science. It's really exciting.
And it's so wonderful that we're here where the research exists now. Before it was, I
Yeah.
think, always kind of relegated to,
It was speculative,
yeah.
and it wasn't supposed to happen. I mean, we're lucky we got funding. I mean, running a
Yes.
clinical study, even a small pilot study is so expensive. And just to have somebody believe in us enough, really, really profound so that we could
Amazing.
put, good solid science to these ideas.
So important because, I think especially for women, we've been marketed to for so many decades about what is healthy, and so many
Yeah.
of us feel jaded and maybe just not even excited to try something new because, is it going to work? But to have
Yeah.
real science behind it, it's not
Yeah.
only just important work that it exists in and of itself, but it's so healing, I think, for women's psyches to know that what their efforts are going to be rewarded. All right, let's quickly talk about
Supplements.
supplements.
Yeah.
Where do they fit into your ecosystem?
I talk about supplements that I think are really worth considering in the book. There's a whole big section there. And by the way, I think you can get a lot of this information on the website.
Great. Well,
And the
the
diet,
show
yeah,
notes.
you
Yeah.
can link to those things. But so there are a handful of ways that I think are important. So first of all, omega-3 fatty acids. There's a decent chunk of evidence on them on having a sufficient amount of omega-3 fatty acids being associated with longevity, younger biological age, et cetera, et cetera. So, and most of us do not consume enough. Again, we can measure these, our doctors can measure it, we can get, insurance coverage in a lot of cases. Omega-3 fatty acids, I think, for most of us is an essential supplement. Vitamin D for the majority of us is something that's essential that we don't get adequate amounts in our dietary pattern. Even here, you can see like my skin, I'm like I get a lot of sun being here in Mexico. And I still need to take 5,000 IU of vitamin D, and I take it with vitamin K. K2 specifically. What else? Liver. So we think liver is a superfood. It's basically a multivitamin in a food matrix. We're fans of liver, and we included that in our dietary pattern. But most people aren't going to want to take it, and so you can do that. You can do liver capsules if you subscribe to that. You can take it. When we can't get all of that important polyphenol information in our food, you can take them in supplement form. So, for example, green tea phytochemicals are massively important. I am not a green tea drinker, I'm a coffee drinker. So I take a green tea extract. It's just worth it to me. And I don't eat sufficient amounts of turmeric. And so I take some extra curcumin. There is a postbiotic compound called urolithin A that comes from pomegranates. Some of us make urolithin A. Actually, I make urolithin A, but I don't make a prodigious amount of it. I think urolithin A is a worthy supplement consideration. Most of us don't get enough magnesium in our diets, and we might need a little extra magnesium support. We can do fermented foods. So we didn't include fermented foods in the study, but in the book, I do recommend fermented foods strongly because we need
Yep.
to take care of our microbiomes. And the dietary pattern really is dense in prebiotics, so it does help nurture a healthy microbiome, but a probiotic compound or definitely including some fermented foods, I think is essential.
So all in
Um,
all, you are pro supplement, and in fact,
mhm,
it
mhm,
does fit in to a healthy diet. And
totally.
I think that's an important thing, there because people are
Mhm,
on each side. They feel like they can get everything from their diet, but it's really hard. And I think supplements can give
yeah,
you that extra boost. But
yeah,
foundationally, if your diet is not where it should be, you can't out supplement a poor diet. So I think
right,
it's
right.
important people to
Yeah,
understand that. Okay.
yes.
Wrapping up before we do some rapid fire, what over what time frame can women realistically expect to see changes in their biological age markers, and how would they know that what they're doing is working?
That's great. So easy peasy. Our intervention was 8 weeks, and I would at least, you know, make an 8-week commitment to that journey. You could start with one of the biological age tests that we talked about, or you
Mhm.
could use the biological age quiz and then do a follow-up with it. You could ask your doctor to do some very basic chemistries and use that pheno-age calculator we have on our website. But I think in 8 weeks' time, you could anticipate seeing some favorable changes. I mean, we know in our patients who've got blood sugar issues or high A1C or, other imbalances that we can see favorable changes, in a short order of
2
time.
months. It's
Yeah,
nothing. I mean, what
yeah, yeah.
such a short period of time, and I just love that.
Mhm.
Okay, last question before we do our rapid fire. If a woman listening right now could only make one change this week before she fully commits to an 8-week journey, what does the research say that would genuinely move the needle on her biological age? One thing.
Wow, that's a great question. I wanna give you my, answer. I would first say she's not sleeping, she needs to get some sleep, so I would say that. And there's definitely a ton of research that supports that. Obviously, you know, they could swap that out with exercise. Um, One of the things that I like to encourage people to do, because people will be like, "Oh my God, this dietary pattern, it's so overwhelming." Blah. In the back of the book, there's there's an epinutrient appendix, and it's 30 pages. And I tell people, go in there with a highlighter, or go in there, open the book, take your highlighter if you have it, if you have the hard copy, and highlight everything that you're already eating, because you're already eating epinutrients. I guarantee that your diet is already fairly full of epinutrients, and so you can go in and kind of validate what you're doing right. I like that. I like to start my, some validation before I gut and rebuild everything.
I love both of these recommendations. So you get a bonus one. I love the anchor on the sleep because for
Yeah.
women, right, and sort of
Yes.
circles back to the beginning of our conversation, the added stress factor is such a pro-ager. And
Yes.
notice that the best thing you can do to slow down aging is like, we could frame it as nothing, right? Rest. Rest is where you are
Yeah.
just a human being, not a human
Yeah.
doing. And even the affirmatory practice of highlighting all the things that you're already doing well. It's like a hug, Kara, that you're
No,
letting
I
women
know.
give themselves. I think that's really important because,
I love it.
we're
Yeah.
also worried about getting it right and whether or not we find ourselves in sort of an orthorexic mindset. We all want to do our best to take care of ourselves. And I think as women, especially coming home to this idea of rest is the
Mhm.
next chapter for us in so
Yeah,
many ways.
that's right.
So many ways. Okay, let's do a couple rapid fire fun things here. Okay. True or false? It's too late to reverse biological aging once you're in perimenopause.
It's definitely false. In fact,
Yay.
research suggests you can get more bang for your buck in some ways, you know, when when you're doing these things and you're older.
Love it. Love
Yeah.
that. Okay, your hot take. Biological age will eventually replace chronological age as the number that actually matters in medicine.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
so.
I'm with you. Rate it on 1 to 10 for epigenetic impact. Cold plunges.
Oh, good question. Cold plunges, epigenetic impact. I don't know, maybe a 7. It's like I have to say it's not directly in my wheelhouse, but
I'd rate it lower, but I'm happy that
okay.
you're
Yeah, I don't
enthusiastic.
know. This is a guess. I just really don't know.
This or that, a perfect diet for 8 weeks or consistent sleep for a year.
God, that's a good question. I would go with consistent sleep.
Agree.
Speaking of consistent sleep, we didn't talk about community, and community may just very well trump both of those, but
Oh,
yeah.
yes, we don't have we're gonna have to do another call just or another recording just about oxytocin and nitric oxide
Yeah,
and all of these other fun
yeah.
things that okay, finish the sentence. The most underrated thing a woman can do for longevity right now is
Ah, that's so great. The most underrated thing a woman can do is, really participating in a good hug. I mean, that could be your kid, that could be your parent, your spouse, it could be your puppy, your kitty, like just really melting into a juicy connection. That would be the most underrated thing in my opinion. And
fun
we're
fact.
doing that. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just even being in the community of this podcast and sharing with each other, it's like a stress reducer.
Yeah.
But I actually ran an experiment in high school. I've been researching for a long time. I did this for probably 4 months where I wanted to go out and get 12 hugs a day
Oh my god.
from friends at school
Aw.
and then also then noticing the days where where I wasn't meeting that tally, how that impacted my stress and my ability to do my homework and my ability to
Interesting. You
sleep
were
at
doing
night.
that in high school?
I'm such a
Wow, that's
nerd.
so
Yeah.
cool. That's awesome.
But yeah, obviously the benefits of hugging, I'm a huge fan because they're
Yeah. Why
multifactorial.
wasn't that
So
cool that you did that way back in the day?
yeah, way back in
Good
the
for
day.
you.
All right. Well, I would love for women to figure out how they can get in touch with you and be on top of all your research. So where can they find you
Yeah.
online, on
Mhm.
social? Where's the
Instagram,
best
yeah.
way?
Mhm. Yeah, very active on social media. Instagram is probably the site that will resonate with most folks. And it's Dr. Kara Fitzgerald, and website is drkarafitzgerald.com. We have a podcast. There's all sorts of stuff over there, blogs, blah, 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 blah. And again, the quiz that people can
And the
access.
book, definitely pick up
And the
this book.
right.
It is groundbreaking
Yeah.
research. I think it's my personal health library is probably one of my most valuable possessions. And I think this is a book that belongs in everybody's personal health library. So thank you for doing this work and sharing this groundbreaking information with everybody. It's evergreen and important. And we're so thrilled that you were able to share that with us today. So pick up the book, everybody. And until next time, take really good care of your ovaries and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, so that you don't miss another episode of the Ovary Club on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And we'll talk to you next time.